Listeners, beware. You're going to learn a lot about comic books in this interview. Very lucky here to have Nev Howard, or Neville. He answers to both. Thanks for joining us, Nev.
Hey, no problems at all, man. Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
You've got a fantastic comic book podcast that we're calling Grail Hunters Australia podcast. That's the official title now that we're plugging.
Yeah, really appreciate it. It is called Grail Hunters Australia podcast. We intentionally the origins of this was we were trying to keep it focused around the local community. So, focus around local collectors, local events, local everything. I know, but based on some of the numbers I've seen in listening or people listening and downloading, we've got a good audience in Europe and US too, but my focus is Australia and promoting local artists, promoting local events. We understand the similar challenges we have in collecting and trying to source, especially from overseas, which might be a lost cause for foreign listeners, if you know what I mean. So it's a good angle to have. Yeah, it's a good angle to have.
I come across you guys because a friend of mine said, I think I want to get rid of my comic book collection. And a friend of his he had two collections. He had his own collection and then his friend's collection. And he said, I want to get rid of some. And I said, let's see what we can do on the internet. So I think a mutual friend of ours, Andre Brockhausen, suggested Grail Hunters Facebook page.
Yeah.
And, we flogged a lot on there, but I was surprised at how fierce and how healthy the Australian comic book scene is. I guess you're not, because you're right in the guts of it, man.
Look, it is. It is. And I think also, as big as it is, like the Grail Hunters group's about 1,400 people strong at the moment, of which we have activity and active members of about 1,300 on the Facebook pages and on Instagram and so forth, right? So it's a good community because people get to know each other. And with that knowledge comes trust and authenticity, which is really important when you are collecting, especially when you're in high-end books, man. Throwing $1,000 or $10,000 at a comic where you don't know that what happens on the other end of the transaction is always, it's a little bit dodgy and a little bit risky. But if you actually know that, we have common friends or we've spoken before, we know each other from pages, I like the books you have, you get that bond and that authenticity and trust that comes with that relationship. And that makes it easier to discuss any collection deals. Let's call it collection deals that might happen. And as a result, organically, sometimes you get better prices or you do trades instead of sales. Even the benefits of using friends and family on PayPal instead of goods and services. It doesn't sound like a big thing, but a lot of people who sell weekly or monthly might pay hundreds of dollars on service fees. But if you sell it to people who trust you and you trust them, all of a sudden that's extra money in your pocket. So either you can lower your prices a little bit or pocket a little bit extra that you would have not have had if you had gone through eBay and other formal selling chains.
Yeah, it was a great place to hang out and everyone was completely honest and people were just chucking money into my account and I'm being a relatively honest person, were chucking the comics back at them. And there were no invoices or anything like that. Oh, God, it went really well.
Yeah.
And then no one sort of knocked me on my prices, when I was a bit high, because I come in all fresh-faced and not really, knowing where the comics zeitgeist was. He had a lot of comics. He had a lot of titles that I wasn't really didn't know much about. A lot of Star Wars and stuff like that. And it's a great place to hang out. And your podcast is a really great place to learn about what's happening with comics. It's a
I'm glad you say that because the focus around I feel like when I'm trying to explain the podcast to people, I say you can watch 60 Minutes or A Current Affair, or you can watch Jimmy Fallon or Jon Stewart. We are the Jimmy Fallons and Jon Stewarts of comic. So it's lighthearted, there's a lot of banter, but it's still informative. You take something away, and we aim to always give every episode a similar focus, right? It could be the NFTs of the recent episodes, or it could be highly collectible grails, or why moderns are risky, or something like that. So we pick a theme and we discuss and you actually learn something from it without really feeling like you're being preached to, right? And I think that's the secret to why we've had a really good response to the podcast.
We better mention the other guys. It's Ben and Mike, isn't it?
Yeah, don't need to mention them. Yeah, no, look, Benji and Mike Speakman, we've been together since episode 1. And it's always been one of those things where I think we were friends at the start, but we also didn't necessarily have a very common interest, because I think it would be really boring if we three had the same priorities in collecting, the same interest in collecting, and the same channels of collecting, because then we'd only be patting each other on the back, right? But the fact that Mike brings an angle where he's more familiar with modern comics and he's a gamer, like Ben is more vintage toys and bargain hunting, and he's also a bit of a gamer, whereas I'm more trying to fill up my gold and silver age collections, or silver and bronze age collections. And I'm probably also a lot more cynical around modern stuff, especially when there's a lot of hype around it. So that makes a good conversation, because we play it off against each other and you test your theories really on the air, which is great.
Yeah. So most people think about collecting things and then keeping them. When they think about buying and selling collectibles, most people go to antiques. I'd love to be an antiques dealer. I haven't said that for years. But in Australia, country hasn't existed for long enough.
You're 100% right.
It's just what people have brought over in their rucksack in the past 220 years or something, and it doesn't really work as a thing. But
and then anyway, also, I think antique shops in general, if they don't know what they have, they overprice it in case it's good.
Yeah, sure.
Do you know what I mean? Do you know?
Sure.
I think with the naiveness comes the like, it must be expensive because it's old. And I think that kind of kills the market too. I love going to old vintage bazaars. I can't drive past one, right? I think we went to Echuca. I planned the trip to Echuca around small towns and shops, and I made sure to stop at every one of them to have a look-see, because you never know when you find gold. And I did find gold. So that makes it amazing. But when you have a shop that's marketing itself as high-end antiques, you're not going to get a bargain, and also you're not going to get something fairly priced, because they've got to pay rent, right? Shop fronts are shop fronts.
Absolutely. So people are thinking of collecting comics and then not really ever getting rid of them until, you either find a wife or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or
yeah, very true.
Which is what happened to me when I was a lad. And that's when my most valuable collection went out at 25 cents and 50 cents. But you're a real trader, and you don't shy away from that. Certainly not on the podcast. What's it like at the moment to be buying and selling comics and doing it for money? You're not doing it for a laugh.
Do you know what? I was very much probably like you. Between when I started collecting late 80s, early 90s, and probably about 2017, I only sold once, but I sold my entire collection because I was early 20s and I needed money to go out to nightclubs. I didn't have a job, and I already knew then that I had valuable stuff. So I was selling first appearance of Silver Surfer, first Silver Age appearance of Blue Beetle, all those, but I was selling it to book exchanges. So I was actually doing a sales pitch to educate him on what the comics are. And he's like, well, this must be cool. Then I show him the old Overstreet price guide and say, this is $1,000 near mint. I don't have near mints, but I use that as a trigger to actually just fire his interest. And then he ended up buying my entire collection, and I lived off the money for 6 months while I was a student, which was great. But with that also comes instant remorse. So I just instantly started collecting again. And probably around 2017, I realized that, you can only get that far if you want to collect big books, if you're not intending to sell, because you can easily get sucked into buying 20 or 30 or 40 comics a month. And they're all brand new on the Wednesday comics, right, that you read and you put in a box and you forget. My mentality back then was, if they become high value and they scale in value, that's fine, but that's not why I'm buying it. I was buying it for the reading it in entertainment and the art and everything like that. So around 2016, 17 is when I decided, well, I'm going to pivot how I collect, and I'm going to sell stuff, almost like Mary Kondo, almost like Mary Kondo, where it's like things that don't bring me joy anymore. I haven't read it for years. It's in a box. I'm going to sell it off and I'm going to buy stuff I like. And with that comes economy of scale. All of a sudden, the first time I did a sale, I didn't even sell a lot, man. I sold probably 40 or 50 comics on an auction. I made $500, and it was liberating because all of a sudden I realized that it is a fixed asset that's got monetary value that I can convert to cash to buy more fixed assets. And then it became kind of a game for me to see, you know what, I'm not going to buy a $50 comic at $50. I'm going to try and get a bargain at $50 so that I can sell it again and buy more and just keep basically building my collection up. And when you do that and you can see the value of your collection scale, values, I'm just going to throw it out there. Value is not the only thing that interests me in the books, but I've got, obviously you can enjoy it for different reasons, but for me, the challenge I set myself was to be able to own all the big first appearances of Marvel Comics. And for me, the only way to get there is to actually consider it by value and buy and sell my way there. So I never worried about having 2 or 3 of something if I know that it had that upward trend of interest and value so that I could sell it a year or 2 years from now. And it's great. Do you know what? It's so rewarding to be able to do it without having to take money out of your own bank account.
That's fantastic. Did you say Blue Beetle? Are you a Blue Beetle fan?
I'm a massive Blue Beetle fan. I've got a tattoo of him.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You're the first Blue Beetle fan I've ever met. You should be shot and stuffed. You're rare. You're a rare bird.
I started with Ted Cord because that was my generation's Blue Beetle, sure. And working with Booster Gold, right? I've got Blue Beetle and Booster Gold comics around the table while I'm talking to you because they finally released another series. But as with everything else, I grew an interest in the character and bought some of the older stuff. So I've got number 1 from the 60s. It's just one of those things where it's like watering a garden. The more you know, the more you want. Yeah, so I don't think you'll ever stop collecting. No.
I'm so boring with my tastes. I'm like X-Men and anything by Alan Moore.
Do you know what? There's nothing wrong with being focused in collecting. Yeah. Like if you are focused in collecting Alan Moore and X-Men, you can actually put a lid on it one day. You can say, well, I'm done. I just wanted to collect the original run. I wanted to collect all Alan Moores. I wanted to get some signed. I've got all that. I'm done. I can stop chasing. And I think the way I'm doing it is you wake up and every day there's something new to chase. There's things that you didn't realize you wanted. And that keeps it exciting for me. I would say, 2000, again, I'm going back to that date, 2017, when I first bought a big collection at a garage sale. That triggered my interest in Marvel. And before that, it was 100% DC. I probably had a short box and a half of Marvel and about 70 short boxes of DC. And now I've probably got 20 short boxes of Marvel and I've got probably 8 of just keys. And it's because I thought, you know what, the keys won't get any cheaper and the $5 might become $6 comics. So I'm going to go for the big hitters, the big books, get them as fast as possible. I don't care about the grade. And then I'll fill out the collection around that. And that's just as satisfying. You know what? I've done that with Eternals. I've done it with Silver Surfer. I've done it with She-Hulk. I've done it with Ghost Rider, where you end up with everything, but you don't wait for the biggest ones at the end. Because if it takes you 3 years, I don't know if you know how the industry changes in 3 years. 3 years ago, you could have bought Avengers 1 for $1,000 at a 2 grade, and now it's $4,000. Daredevil was $700 at a 2 grade, now it's $3,000. So the strategy that I apply is just, go for the biggest ones and build around that, because everything else, it's like a comet with a long tail. The longer the tail, the cheaper the books become.
So getting around to mentioning properties that are being monetized, Marvel stuff, not so much DC stuff. I can't think of too much that DC's got left that's got a lot of value. But anyway, Marvel stuff goes on and on and on. Yeah,
correct. And the problem with DC, being a DC boy, and like you see, just got DC tattoos everywhere, is it's hard to not just be angry every time DC releases something new, because they've corporatized it a lot. It's not about the entertainment anymore. And I feel it's very bland. They're going very safe with their storylines. They're going very safe with their selections of who's in the team. And all of that just means that, you know, you're not reading something like wondering what's going to happen at the end of the comic or end of the series, because those characters will eternally last, because that's what's important to their brand. And they're diluting Batman to the point where he's vapor. You know, there's 15 Batman books a month, and there's a Bat family with 15 Robins, and it's just doesn't matter anymore. It's really hard to say I'm really enjoying this because it's relevant. They have great writers, so it's really, for me, like, you got to know what to pick. If you follow a great writer like the Tom Taylors or Tom Kings, if they write something, I'll buy it and I'll read it and I'll enjoy it. And then there's a few things I'll buy for the sake of buying, because I've been buying them for 30 years. But they're few and far between where I'm excited to actually pick up a book and say they took a risk on this and I'm enjoying it. Like Blue and Gold was good. There's Lobo and Crush with his daughter that I'm really enjoying. There's a DC Black, so adults only Superman. This is Lobo. That's nice. But it's 3 books out of 60 a month, right? So if you closely follow it and you have a degree of interest, you'll find stuff you're interested in. Whereas with Marvel, they're more like, you know, the in-your-face entertainment, and that translates to other media, and that's why people are so hooked on it, right? Marvel's much bigger in Australia than in where I grew up in South Africa. We didn't have exposure to Marvel, so for us it was a foreign concept. You just saw it on TV. Like the first exposure we had to Marvel was comic cartoons and stuff, and maybe a few newsagents. And that was it.
Yeah. I'll just divert before I forget and say, you know, there's a lot of great writers, there's a lot of great story, there's a lot of great art. It's not all great, but there's a lot of good stuff happening in comics. Yeah. How can we get I won't even say kids, I'll just say young people under 30 into comics? Is gaming just sort of smashing everything?
I think it is, man.
It's the biggest thing.
I tell you, I was reading, you know, Facebook memories. Sure. Every day it pops up, and they've got like an algorithm knowing, like, this is the first time you log on, I'm going to shove it in your face. So my Facebook memories yesterday was when the first Injustice game came out, and the revenue from the game surpassed the total sales of DC Comics for a year, and the game was out for 30 days. So it shows you, like, you know what, make one good game or have 180 creators work on 30 comics for 12 months and you get the same money in the bank. So you understand where their focus is as a revenue-generating multimedia conglomerate. The comics is a side project to innovate ideas for them, but it's not their important leg anymore. And I think that's become the challenge. And people are taking advantage of free comic book days, for instance, where it was intended to pique the interest of kids and stuff, but you have to go to a comic shop in the first place to get free comics. Who's going to go out of their way, if they don't know what comics are, to go get a free comic at a comic shop? Do you know who gets the free comics? People already read comics. So I'm sorry. But my point is like, it's a wasted initiative by how they deploy it. If they said, okay, let's send free comics in newspapers, to houses for people who buy newspapers or magazines, or at Woolies at the checkout, get a free comic and stuff. Expose kids to it in a more organic way without having to get in a car and drive 50 kilometers and stand in a queue to pick one book. It's really hard. It's really hard to actually get a new generation into it.
Buying and trading with cryptocurrency, and also there being the shares apps these days, name any 6 that you like. That's encouraging young people to get involved in a different type of, you know, retail. And some of those young people might look at comics as something. You might drag in a few that way. Do you reckon?
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing. I think that the younger people who come into the comic industry or comic collecting, they're probably also more focused, exactly what you're saying. They're more focused on similar way of buying sneakers for investment, or buying sports cards or Pokemon cards. They see it as a commodity that they can bargain with, trade with, to gain value. And there's nothing wrong with it, but they're not going to be the readers who sustain the 20,000 books a month to be able to make sure that the title continues, unfortunately. They're going to, as with everybody else, including me, they're going to pump the aftermarket. They're not going to be the ones buying it first on the store. They're going to be the ones buying it at markets and online and flipping it later on.
I just think,
and that is healthy. I'm going to throw it out there.
Yeah,
that's probably healthier than it's ever been, especially the hype flipping books, the moderns, the ones that just come out 3 days ago and it's got a speculative character. That is very, very healthy because there's a lot of people playing in that area because there's variant covers, there's opportunities to have ratios. There's so many things there that, you know, if you know your stuff, you can make some money, but it's a constant chase, man. It's literally like next week you've got to be on it. You've got to read previous for next month. And it's a little bit too high maintenance for me. Like for me, I'm more in the longer term, tried and trusted. Books are 30 years old and might be up and coming now.
Yeah. So, you know, there's a few studios making great books, and some of those get monetized into the tens and hundreds of millions. And that's how comics are going to stay around for the foreseeable future, aren't they? Because some really smart people who make comics, and then it's a visual medium, but it has a story. Ipso facto, that translates to the screen, right?
Yeah. And you know what, exactly what you're saying. If I look at 4 of the 5 hot properties at the moment, they're all independently owned, creator-owned comics that might be published by a small indie publisher. If I look at Something's Killing Children, anything from Image, anything from Boom, anything from IDW, where creators own the rights, they've got their best interests at heart when they're writing it, when they're publishing it, when they put the book out. Their own balls are on the line when they do that, right? It's not a DC or Marvel property where they've got no ownership or stake in the success in it. And because of that, they give their best. They deliver the goods. Like the biggest news for the last month was Saga's returning at issue 55. And it's an amazing series, and it's an amazing creative team. And the world went crazy, right? The challenge with that, though, is most of those stories have a organic start and end to it, because you get independent creative writers who want to tell you a story. The story's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. And once that's done, it's done. How does it stay relevant 10 or 20 or 30 years from now? That's going to be the challenge that we haven't encountered yet, because all those stories are so relatively new in comparison to the Marvels and the DCs that we're still enjoying them. But are we going to enjoy them in 10 or 20 or 30 years? Take, for instance, Walking Dead. Yeah, it was massive. It's died down. The interests have died down. They're in the last season of shooting. Would the comics maintain value? We don't know.
It's very hard to say. One thing you can't say is it's not good. It's good. Yeah. It's good. Like you might not like comics, but if you're at all interested in a good story, and it's good stuff. That's why I look
absolutely. Absolutely. No, sorry, I'm interrupting.
I was going to say, if you look at some of Alan Moore's lesser known titles, and I'll just name one, like The Ballad of Halo Jones. Do you know it?
No,
you don't know it, but it's fantastic compared to your average Green, 329 Green Lantern or something like that. I mean, it is so much better in quality. Yeah. And you only have to read a few pages and you think, oh, this is good. This could be a movie. Yeah. This could be could be making some executive of CBS $5 million a year. It's great. So I think comics will stay around as a generator of stories and content. And
it'll just evolve in how it's presented, I think. The independent market's bigger than ever before, and it's healthier than ever before, and it's outselling DCs and Marvels of the world by far in many cases. And I think that's how it's going to stay healthy. If you can follow creators who are known for telling a story that you like, the type of story that you like, you'll be inspired to keep buying this stuff. That's what I do. I follow the creators around, whether it's artists or writers, and it makes my life easy because I know I'm going to get a quality product and I'm going to be entertained by it. Instead of what I used to do, where I follow a character like a Green Lantern or something, and then you're just disappointed at the end of the day because the writers don't understand the character, and you can't continue like that for forever.
They need new characters. Speaking of new characters, have you ever submitted a comic yourself?
I have. Look, I've self-published a few. And I was on the verge of having something via IDW, which was very, very exciting. It didn't work out because they had their summer schedule kind of locked in, and then their management teams and everything changed. That is what it is. But it's one of those things where I always think that, it's similar to every other creator. I'll just make it. I'll do it myself. I've just got to put the time into it to actually get it done.
Yeah.
But I've done the previews and stuff.
What do you think you're looking at for a short run, money wise? What do you think you'd have to stump up?
Oh, look, there's so many avenues at the moment where it's considerably low risk. You can co-invest via small independent publishers. A lot of them do that. Or you can just go, I think something like Kickstarter would obviously test the theory of whether or not it's actually a good idea that you want to invest in. So before you actually put money into it, see whether there's an audience for it. I won't kickstart the first 20 issues, but I'll kickstart maybe the first issue to see whether or not there's an audience for something. And if there is, then all of a sudden it becomes self-sustainable because the first one will pay for the second one and so forth and so forth. And I think that's probably the best way to go about it. So for me, and again, a lot of the times once you've done that and you've proven yourself as a creator, and you've got some runs on the board, then publishers pick it up and they'll reprint it and they'll pick up your story for you to continue. So I'm more than happy to do it that way around as well.
Yeah, that sounds smart.
My childhood dream was always writing Justice League International because that's my type of comic, right? But I think I've grown away from that.
Yeah, I've submitted a few, and they've mainly been in. There was one really violent one. I surprised myself with my own brain. And another couple of ones were fantasy ones, and I do believe fantasy is sort of being left behind a little bit on the silver screen. I mean, the last thing that they had a crack at was redoing Dr. Dolittle, and I'm not ever going to watch that ever.
Yeah.
But I mean, honest fantasy with magical elements, but not just magic,
and not just sci-fi.
Not sci-fi.
As fantasy.
I don't mind sci-fi. I'm happy with sci-fi.
No, I get what you're saying. Though, true fantasy. Yeah.
So going back to your XYZ leagues under the sea. I think it was 10,000, wasn't it? I'm getting older, Nev.
You can't be much older than me, so that's all right.
No,
we can't use that excuse.
Can you give your fans mention 3 properties to look out for and invest in that they might be able to earn a few bucks on?
Oh, look, I think for the past 2 years or so, I've been talking about because Marvel kind of had let's call it a hiatus after Avengers, right? But you could also already pick up that these storylines are evolving in a certain angle where they're going to start exploring things. And I think I was talking to Jeff Kerrigan drunk at my pool table a year and a half ago, just before COVID. And we were talking about, what is next for them after Avengers? What are they going to explore? And we were talking about what are they already setting up without us knowing? Because with Guardians of the Galaxy, they've got that rich tapestry of characters that are probably relatively cheap to license, and also very open-ended in what they can do with them, right? It's not as established as the Spider-Mans, where you already know, there's a Mary Jane, and you already know there's Uncle Ben, and you already know there's Green Goblin. So picking something up that's going to excite the readers who understand the characters, but also going to entertain people who don't know who they are, like they've done with Guardians of the Galaxy. So I always thought that the next step would be going more into the space and the galaxy and the intergalactic focus of it. Yeah. And that could open up Galactus, that could open up Silver Surfer, that could open up Adam Warlock and so forth. And, they literally officially announced Adam Warlock in the past few months. And prior to that, I was buying them on the cheap, just purely because of the fact that I knew it was coming. And now that it's official, it's spiking again. It's already spiked, but it just keep going up. And it's never too late. The movie's 3 years away, and by the time the movie shows up, the prices of today is going to be something that we regret not taking advantage of. So if I have to give you top 3 off the top of my head, man, I'd still say, Eternals had a very lukewarm reception so far. but I do think that it's a stepping stone for Marvel to tell a bigger story. So I don't think that even whether the movie's successful or not, they're not going to discard it. It'll be something that they're going to grow the next step of Phase 5 on. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. So it's just really about being patient. If you want to get rich overnight, it's not the thing for you. But I definitely think that's going to be one of the books that in the long term will gain a lot of value. Eternals, but also because of the fact that in the series, the characters' first appearances are kind of spread around number 1, number 4, number 5. And I think that's probably a good one to look out for, and you can probably still get him relatively cheap when you get him raw.
I've got a mate who's mad keen on Moon Knight. I think they'd have a lot of trouble spending $120 million on a Moon Knight movie. What do you reckon?
Look, the thing with Moon Knight is he already had a cult following because of the craziness of the character.
Yeah,
it was never a cheap book. If you ask me, like, invest, it's probably a very safe investment, but you're not going to get it cheap. You're going to get a 3 for $2.5K or 5 for $3.5K or something like that. But when you get it, it's not going to go down. So if you're willing to spend the money, it's a sound investment. It's like buying Bitcoin, in the sense that, you know, it might fluctuate up and down over the time, but ultimately it's just going to gain value. For me, there's 5 of them in the Bronze Age, and I would say Moon Knight, Punisher, Werewolf by Night is another one that I think is up and coming, and people should be taking advantage of, because the first appearance of Werewolf by Night is still relatively cheap for a Bronze Age book. And again, you can get it mid to high grade, so 7 or 8 without really spending a lot of money. And it's just one of those where there's always rumors, because they're bringing in Moon Knight as the movie, like they're going to bring in the cast, right? They're going to bring in the werewolf, they're going to bring in Blade and all that type of stuff. So for me, it's about exploring the outer boundaries of the characters that's already announced, and just committing to some of them, because it's inevitable that they're going to make it.
Oh, I lost you there. Inevitable that they're going to make it
into movies or TV shows. Sorry, that's what I meant.
Well said.
Yeah. So for instance, with Moon Knight, you know, Moon Knight comes from the comic of Werewolf by Night.
Sure.
And that means that character will make an appearance, and if it's successful, it will keep growing. And I definitely think, like, the first appearance of a character called Jack Russell is inevitable to gain grounds.
I think they really underused the Guardians of the Galaxy in the last 2 Avengers movies, because they didn't want people to get sick of them.
Yeah, and I think it's also
Groot in particular. Like, people love Groot, so they're holding Groot back. Did you notice that? Not so much Groot.
Yeah. I think it's also because they have 2 movies announced already, and they don't want to have them have the limelight in an Avengers movie and then continue into their own movies. So what I'm thinking is there's going to be 2 more movies of Guardians of the Galaxy coming up, and one's literally a silly movie, like a Christmas special. And I think they'll use that to test characters like Nova. I think Nova is going to be one of those characters that we're going to see break through. I don't know which Nova yet, because there's a few of them, right? It's like Green Lantern. But I think they'll say, okay, let's put a character like that in there, see how people react, and then put him in the next movie a year and a half later, and make him a core part of the team. I've been reading Guardians of the Galaxy for a long, long time, and relatively long time. I've read the back catalogue. Let me rephrase. And there's a wealth of characters there that they can take advantage of, and literally, again, like I said earlier, do anything with, and it'll entertain people. And the comic community will be excited about it, because it's something that they understand and identify with, which is good.
Yeah, they really casted. Is that the word? They really cast Guardians well, and it was a real witch's brew of people that they chucked together, and it really paid off for them. And I was glad. I was so, like, I'm not a fan of the comic, but I was so glad when it was making 4 squillion, 7 squillion, 18 billion.
Yeah, because it tells you there's more coming, and you're enjoying.
That's right. It tells me that there's more coming, and that's what I want. And by the way, I do want another Green Lantern movie. I do. I don't want to pay for it personally.
HBO is doing a series, and from what I've seen, like the Watchmen series on HBO is amazing in my opinion. So if they do it right with the right writers and the right budget, and it's not cheap, because the challenge with Green Lantern is there's going to be a lot of special effects with the rings, right? They can't just half-arse it and know people don't notice. So for me, it's about really saying, you know, we got to commit to this and not cancel it after episode 2, because that's what's happened with Swamp Thing. That was also amazing. You know, get in it for the long run and get people to understand the concept and you know, enjoy it, and then all of a sudden that'll give them the franchise that they are lacking in Marvel. Oh, sorry, in DC.
Well, look, if you think comics are for kids, read Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing, and that'll change your mind.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's great. It's great. And that's the thing that came out mid late 80s, and that was the first DC logo comics that suggested for mature readers before Vertigo started, right?
Yeah,
it was really good, very, very good.
It's good, and I think the Watchmen TV stuff was some of the best TV I've ever seen. It's some of the best things I've ever looked at with my eyes. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
And there should be a lot more.
Going back to your other point, like you asked me about 3 books, right? And I went on a tangent about Werewolf by Night.
We both did. It's fine.
but looking at, in principle, Silver Age books at the moment, and where they're at, like even the smaller characters that we didn't consider the key core of Silver Age titles have gone beyond the average Joe's ability to just go and buy off a shelf when you feel like it when you walk into a shop. Now, step forward 15 years, you're looking at the Bronze Age books that are starting to do the same, right? We've got First Appearance of the Hulk that's at the moment, you know, a 10K book on any given day, and again, it's like one of those things where the higher Hulk 181 goes, the higher it pulls the books around it. So if you look at First Appearance of Punisher, all of a sudden there's 3.5 is a 2K book that used to be a $600 book 4 years ago. So for me, it tells you that the popularity of those characters are so intertwined with each other, and they have their own universe that Hulk 181 and First Appearance of Wolverine keeps climbing, it means giant size X-Men will keep climbing. It means Punisher will keep climbing. It means First Appearance of Ghost Rider will keep climbing, and First Appearance of Moon Knight will keep climbing. And I can give you the top 10 there, and they will all, in my opinion, be the safest investments that you could make in comics and pop culture genre, because they are essentially the undiscovered next genre within Marvel that they haven't done anything with. We know Blade's coming. We know to a degree Werewolf by Night and Moon Knight's coming, but it's not on the screens yet. You know? Look at Avengers, where it was 10 years ago. It was a $300 comic, and now it's a $3,000 comic. So it's never too late. I know there are bigger books and they are higher value, but if you buy into them now, 10 years from now, you'll be patting yourself on the back. And if you can buy 5 now, buy 5 now. That's what I do.
I gave away so many Avengers because those 200s and 300s were so lame. Not good.
You say that now, but have you seen what they're going for?
Yeah.
I get it. I get it.
But just so wordy. So Captain America and Dr. Druid decide to stop for 3 pages to have a bloody yarn.
Conversation.
I almost swore. I almost swore, Nevin. I never swear. What am I reading? I don't need to know any of this.
And then you're struggling when you have to page back 2 pages to be like, what are they talking about?
Dr. Drew.
And I know that.
Of all the things to introduce into you're one of your flagship titles, Dr. Druid.
Now, you know what? I'm going to pick on that exact range of Avengers between 200 and 300. You've got the can cover at the moment that's selling $500 and over. You've got the first where Star Fox joins the Avengers that's selling. I think it sold for 900 and 9.8. 900
That's
US.
crazy because he sells.
You've got First Appearance of Gamora in there. You've got so again, it's finding the gold in there, and that's why I don't collect for those type of books. I don't collect the runs because it's frustrating to try and buy the $2 and $3 books that doesn't rate because the story is not great and everything. But it's also rewarding to find the good stuff in between where you're like, oh, this is a good one, and this is a good one. This was. Now, going back to Grail Hunters, we've got a few people where you've kind of organically created the network of understanding of what people's interests are. So I would get messages of a mate called Jake Sumo, who's a tattoo artist in Melbourne who also collects. And what he loves doing is he collects. If you look at the rings around Jupiter, he'll collect on those outer ring like characters you haven't heard of. And he's like, oh, these are going to be the cool characters. And then you know what? Lo and behold, 6 months later, that character's announced in this, or he's like, this is the brother of this character, and he could feature someday. And if it happens, it happens. And at the same time, paying a few bucks for something like that, it's low risk, but lots of entertainment.
It's like some of the villains they pick, and you're just thinking, of all of it, like the collector. Let's make a big thing out of the collector. Yeah, and not a big thing on the page, not a big one in the comics, not interesting, not a cool outfit, but it really worked in the movies. Is having that dude in there.
Yeah, it's about how they give those characters purpose as part of the bigger storyline.
Yeah,
and that's what I enjoy about it. Like, I feel like the movies have treated the character, despite the fact that the stories don't necessarily follow the comics, they treat the characters with respect, which is something I enjoy. The only part I think people had a huge fallout over was the fact that they made Thor a big chubby cry baby in the last Avengers, but I think they needed to do it, otherwise the movie would be 30 minutes because he'd destroy Thanos. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was part of the storyline where they engineered him to a point where he's not as mighty and godly as he should be. Otherwise, Thanos wouldn't have been a match.
As much as I hated those Avengers comics when they had all the lame characters, and this is me speaking, I'm not putting words in your mouth, Nev. It was worse when Thor was there because he's just old so
English Thor, yeah.
Yeah, he was just so powerful, and you just like step out of the way, clang, end of story.
Yeah. And you know what? You are literally, again, going back to the fact that I'm more DC than Marvel, you're literally reiterating why I love the Justice League International books, because you had Blue Beetle, who's literally like a B-grade Batman, and you had Booster Gold, who had a flight ring that he stole from Legion.
I was wondering when Booster Gold was going to get mentioned.
Yeah. So you had a group of people who had a degree of ability and capability, but they weren't amazing. They didn't have Superman there to save the day every day and stuff, and that made for great writing. But it also made it really boring when they returned to the big seven: the Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, blah blah blah. Because all of a sudden, every story is like, who's going to fight these guys? They're all literally gods in the DC universe. There's no real challenge. So it made stories boring, although it probably sells more comics because it's got the main characters on the cover. Yeah, and I guess that's what they were trying to do with Avengers at that point in time.
Well, look,
but Avengers West Coast, did you read Avengers West Coast?
I had almost all of them twice.
Yeah.
I had once as a lad, and then in my, what do I want to say? I want to say late 30s, I bought them all again for next to nothing. Yeah. I'm talking about 20 to 30 cents each, like high-grade stuff. Because I was dealing with a guy in America, and he just released every month. He'd put up his stuff, and I'd just buy most of it. Runs of 12 and 13 and stuff like that. And when I had a box, he'd freight them over to me for like $60, which seemed crazy, which was super cheap at the time. Wow. And I had them all, and I wouldn't even read them again. I just wanted them there. I just wanted to have them because they were so poor. It just wanted to read.
But that's the thing, that they intentionally tried to create a point of difference to the Avengers, and I've always felt like that is Marvel's Justice League International or their Justice League Europe, where they're these crazy characters. The editors didn't give a shit about let that guy die or let that guy take over an island and use government money and stuff like that. It was really good stories, and I think that's kind of what you lose when you have the core characters in a big team, because they're all safe. They've all got their own series, and you can't do much with them.
Yeah, I think I'd rather see a Blue Beetle Booster Gold team up for the next DC movie than another Justice League, I think.
Yeah, because it brings a different aspect to it, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen. And
they're still good.
They're not just the goody two shoes.
They're still fun characters.
Yeah.
Well, we should let Nev go. He's probably got a lot of stuff he wants to do. I'll just say, Nev, I've got $50. I haven't in my hand, but let's say I have, and I'm going to buy a comic on your recommendation. What's it going to be? I know $50 isn't enough, and then we'll come back in a few months' time and see how I've done with my purchase. Is that fun?
Yeah, do it.
What are you going to suggest I spend my $50 on?
For $50?
Yeah,
and again for $50, consider but you have to work with a certain genre of books or a certain era of books to be able to do something. At the moment, I think Department of Truth is still one of the most underrated stories.
Right,
they've already announced the TV show, right? So the fact that it's licensed, something's going to come from it. It's got a lot of hype around it already, but at the same time, they published quite a bit of these because it's got a very prominent creative team. But if you can spend $50 and you investigate a little bit, you can get a good variant cover of #1 for that. And with any luck in the future conventions with Supernova or Oz Comic Con, you can get it signed and slabbed, and it'll be a instant $800-900 comic 2 or 3 years from now.
Fantastic. Well, I'll check back with you, and I'll let you know. I'm going
to
do it.
I just got to ask now. Have you read Department of Truth?
No. I'm intrigued.
Knowing Alan Moore.
Yeah. I know.
It's gonna blow your mind. I'm not going to give anything away.
Okay.
Like even if I have to send you one for $49. Yeah, just read it. It is an amazing story. It's my best read at the moment. I read about 40 comics a month, and it's the one I'm most excited about. The second one is Peter Ray Bill.
I keep thinking that for some reason, he's the most obstinate and stubborn person in the world, Alan Moore. But I keep thinking for some reason he might just go back in his late 70s and do some other stuff, and do some more comic book stuff. It's never going to happen, is it? It's never going to happen.
Yeah. It would be amazing if it did, right? I loved. I know we're wrapping up, but I loved the books Alan Moore brought to Image Comics in the mid-90s, because he did a little bit of a superhero genre, but it wasn't really superhero. It was about the characters, and I absolutely loved it. Like, it was around the same time when Alan Moore did his that Kurt Busiek did Astro City, and you couldn't get a better read at that point in time than those books, right? So absolutely, I agree with you. Like, the guy, if he knows what he's doing, and you can never
predict an Alan Moore story.
Yeah,
you can predict maybe the B stories or something like that, and think they'll go along in that lane, but you can never predict where this is going to turn up.
Yeah, he's got the ability to make irrelevant characters relevant, which is amazing.
But like in 3 pages, pages. Anyway, look, I love the man. Yeah, that's a good one.
I think I've got 4 copies behind me. If you were paying attention, there's 2 there. There's 1, Like, I love his stuff. I don't know him that well. I don't follow everything he's ever released, but he's just one of those guys that if I come across something that I haven't read, I'll buy it and enjoy it.
Yes, it's good. So I'm going to get a Department of Truth comic on Nev's recommendation, and it's going to be fun. We're going to see if it appreciates, and we'll check back with him in a little while. Now, let's wrap it up. Read it, right? But also read, of course. And Grail Hunters is on YouTube. That's a good place to catch it if you're hanging out there. Of course, the podcast, anywhere you get podcasts. If you're in any way interested in buying or selling comics, join the Facebook group. What about you personally, Nev?
I'm just going to reiterate, the Facebook group is a community of collectors who buy and sell, right? But they don't buy and sell to each other on their page. The page is more about creating the network and relationships with each other to empower your collection more than anything. So the main purpose isn't the buying and selling, but the buying and selling is as a result of it, because we've got the Grail traders and Grail hunters and everything else associated with it. So if anybody's just interested in seeing great comics, like the show and tell days are amazing, the first appearances days are amazing, signature Sundays are amazing, and you get to know so many people and so many characters and so many comics, and see the beautiful collections people have, where you can just appreciate other people's stuff. And I think that's what's lovely about it. It's a great angle.
Comic books is not a other country thing. It's an Australian thing. There's a big community. It's all happening. If you want to get involved, please do.
Yeah.
Sound
perfect.
Good?
Perfect.
Thanks,
mate.
Nev. We'll catch you again.
No problems, man. Thanks for the invites. I really appreciated the chat.